Welcome to the What's Lacking podcast. It's your host, Larry Atencia. With me today is Elsa Figueroa. How are you today?
I'm good. And you?
I'm doing well. Good morning so far. Sunday morning. How old are you and where are you from, Elsa?
I'm 43, just turned 43 last month. I'm from Puerto Rico, San Juan.
Okay, that's very cool to hear. I was in Puerto Rico last year. Beautiful country.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, vacationing.
Where did you go?
San Juan, stayed in San Juan, and then we drove to El Yunque. So driving there, we stopped at Carolina, had some food, and yeah, pretty much the tourist itinerary, but it was definitely fun. It was beautiful, and I'm Caribbean myself. I'm from the Caribbean coast of Colombia, so I just like the idea of Caribbean climate, Caribbean culture, Caribbean Spanish, Hispanic culture. So that was really fun. What do you do for a living?
So currently I work for a digital advertising company. I'm working as an email marketing manager. That's like my full-time job. Then on the side, I'm a Spanish translator. That's been like my trade pretty much my entire career until just a few years ago when I switched a little bit, but I'm still doing translations on the side as well, and I teach some dance classes as well.
Okay, what type of dance do you teach?
Belly dance.
Belly dance, okay.
Belly dance.
How did you get into that? Just being Puerto Rican and yeah.
So it's kind of lame. I got into it the same way like most of the people in my generation got into it. We were into Shakira back in the day. She was coming out with her moves, and I knew nothing about it, but I just knew that I loved it and I loved the music.
Yeah.
So I was very attracted to it, but I didn't start taking classes until I was in California, actually.
Talking about the Caribbean coast of Colombia, right? So Shakira is another famous Caribbean Colombian, but also of Lebanese descent.
Lebanese, yeah.
Now, you had mentioned California, and that's maybe a good segue to get into how we connected, which is that you're also, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you're also a writer on Substack. And I was reading an article, I found one of your comments, and I looked at your writings, and I read one of your essays. I finished another one yesterday, the latest one that you posted. But the first one, you had mentioned living in Oakland around 2011, 2012. And that caught my eye because I also lived in Oakland at the same time. And during that stay in Oakland, you had also read a novel by Bolaño, 2666, which is also a novel that I read at that time in Oakland. And so I was I need to, definitely contact this person to see if she would like to be in the podcast, because we seem to have similar interests and just be into books, into writers, novels, etc. I just wanted to get into how you ended up in Oakland and how your stay there was.
So like I mentioned, I'm a translator. I got into translation when I was an undergrad, and after I graduated my bachelor's, I wanted to be a full-time translator, and I didn't know how to get in field. I didn't have any contacts. I had no roadmap at that time, and I think it's a little bit easier now to get into things because we have so much more access to information. But even back in 2004, 2005, there wasn't social media the way we have it now. YouTube wasn't at all what it is. So I was looking at this school in Monterey, and it's this school that specializes in translation and language. At the time, it used to be called the Monterey Institute of International Studies, but it changed. It's become affiliated with Middlebury School, which is another school I was aware of because they also have a school of languages. And I studied translation, and I also studied foreign languages in school. And at the time, I was very interested in language learning and linguistics, everything having to do with language. So I was kind of keeping track of all these places that I could go to maybe. And so I started looking at this school more seriously because I was working in a call center at the time here and had nothing to do with what I gone to school for and had no idea how to break into the career. So I decided to go to this school. I had no money. I had nothing. I got into student loans to be able to go there, which I'm still paying. Anyway, so that I just kind of did I was 27 and I had my return of Saturn, and I needed to make a drastic change to okay, what am I going to do with my life? I don't want to be 30 and be stuck in this job. So I went, and I did my master's degree in translation and interpretation at that school, and then afterwards I had gone to San Francisco as part of living in the nearby, and I fell in love with it immediately. And I thought, when I graduate, I want to come here. And there was work also. So, I had contacts. So I didn't move there right away, but eventually ended up in Oakland.
What neighborhood in Oakland were you at?
I was around Grand Lake. It's where the Grand Lake Theater is, near Lake Merritt. Yeah, I found an apartment there, one of those apartment complexes. At the time, it was like I was paying less than $1,000 for rent in 2012. I was right across the freeway. I got the freeway, like the MacArthur freeway. Yeah. That was my view and my soundscape for about 6 years.
You should have never left, because the rents are. I'm pretty sure they've tripled. The rents on there. Yeah. What's the name of the? I think it's Lakeshore. That's the name of the neighborhood. Lakeshore.
Lakeshore. Yeah, around Lakeshore.
Yeah. I love Oakland. I was there 7.5 years, so I was up and down all those neighborhoods, and I was young at that time as well, and so I have a very special place for Oakland in my life. I grew up in New York City and then went to school in Philadelphia and then moved to San Jose for 2 years and then 7.5 in Oakland. So, I love the Bay Area. I love California. But it got to the point where it was just so expensive. And I met my partner and I moved back. She's from Philadelphia. And, obviously we were like, well, if we're going to live somewhere, it needs to be either where I'm at or where you're at. And my family was back here and her family was back here. So we decided on Philadelphia. And it was obviously easier to start a life financially in Philadelphia because it's just a lot cheaper. But I don't know even if I hadn't met my partner, if I would have been able to stay in Oakland and the Bay Area on a teacher's salary. But beautiful, great people. Hopefully, I'm able to make it back there with my family in the future.
No, it was pretty great. It was never my plan to stay there long term. I always wanted to move back to Puerto Rico. So when, I don't know, there was a point where I was like, I think it was after Trump won, I was like, I want to go back. So.
Why did you not want to stay and go back to Puerto Rico? Is this just a matter of national patriotic feeling towards Puerto Rico, or is it just the climate, beaches?
Well, my partner's also from here, and we were both living in Oakland, and both have all our family here, all our family and friends. Almost everyone is here. I mean, I have family living in different parts of the state, but for the most part, like my mom, my brother, his parents were also here. He was also very unhappy there because even though I had friends and all of that, it was still kind of lonely. And he's very close to his family, to his parents as well. So it was just, and it was a good thing because now I'm able to help my parents, he's able to help his parents. So, I think it was time.
Yeah, it's funny how usually the older one gets, the more one realizes how important it is to be around family and to have that network of people that care for you and strong relationships. What are your hobbies?
Good question. I don't know. I guess dance is kind of like more of a hobby or a passion. I actually struggle a little bit with that term, but yeah, I enjoy dance. I enjoy reading, watching movies, writing. I guess you could call it a hobby as well. So yeah. But it's like with art, like with writing and dance, like I feel hobby is not a good enough word because like I feel like hobbies are supposed to be fun mostly, and these are things that aren't always fun.
That's true. Like I said, I've read 2 of your essays. You're a great writer, and I think that there's a beauty in the struggle. I try to write myself, I have a small blog that I'm planning on bringing on to Substack. And even though it's really hard for me and I feel like I'm not that good, I still feel very much fulfilled and a sense of achievement and pleasure in the struggle of writing and finding the way that I want to say something and just being able to ferret out the ideas that I have circulating and percolating in my head. And so even though hobby sounds a bit casual and perhaps doesn't have the sense of seriousness and commitment that one has of these things that don't bring in maybe the amount of income that one may want, I still think that struggle brings out something that is a little bit more fulfilling than just easy, passive entertainment.
100%.
Yeah. So How did you get into writing? What has made you be able to write so well? Can you give us some ideas around that and some tips for me?
Well, actually, I've been wanting to write. I started writing when I was like 8 years old. It just kind of happened one day. Like I just decided to like write a story. Like I had a dream and then I'm going to write this into a story. And like I was always very passionate about books. I love books. I was surrounded by books. And so I just love stories and playing with my toys and making up stories. And I started writing at a very young age, but I didn't have like a path for how to become a writer formally. So it was always kind of like this thing on the side that I always had to put on hold because it wasn't real or it wasn't serious or maybe I wasn't good enough. So it's just been kind of this thing that's been with me my whole life, but I've never been able to fully dedicate myself to it, unfortunately, for many different reasons. So yeah, I think my training in translation and proofreading and just having to deal with words very regularly kind of gave me a certain sensitivity, and also just reading a lot and many different things and in different languages. But I would say what has given me more tools and more courage and resources to really pursue writing a bit more, to give myself permission, has been actually dance. Because with dance, I feel like I put myself in situations where I never could have imagined.
I like that. Giving yourself the permission to do something. I think it's a really important way of thinking about how to live life. Sometimes I like to think of how we conflate the idea of equality of outcomes, equality of opportunity. And sometimes I feel like we need to focus more on the equality of permission. Do you feel like you could actually do what you want and not necessarily feel that you're stuck based on context or situation, or that pursuing something isn't necessary or it's a waste of time if you can't be what you feel is the ultimate emblem or representation of achievement? That's where I kind of struggled initially, and I feel like I wasted a lot of years just not practicing because, like I said, we both read Bolaño, and I'm pretty sure we read a lot of classics and we read a lot of intelligent, clear writers, right? And so if I compare myself to those writers, I'm just kind of like, why am I even going to attempt to put anything on the internet? When I have an example of complete, utter greatness, and when I read mine, it doesn't even achieve 0.01% of that greatness. And just thinking that, well, my own self-development is important enough for me to want to put something out in the world, and if people consume it, that's cool too. If people don't, I've used it as a way of self-exploration. So I think that was an important realization that I had. Now, I had also mentioned money, because sometimes we do not pursue certain things because, if I pursue this and I don't get paid, I can't eat, I can't pay the rent. So is that something that you've thought about in terms of writing on Substack, how to build up a following of people? And that's the model for Substack, which is, writers charging a subscription fee.
I've thought about it. I just don't have like a very clear roadmap of how to achieve it. I feel like a lot of the people who manage to accomplish that have to do a lot of things I'm not willing to do. I understand that right now things are very difficult for any kind of artist. And I feel like you have to, in order to succeed, it's almost like you have to start a company, have a business, and just promote the hell out of yourself. And I think it's kind of unfair to put that on artists completely. Like, I get it that now it's a bit more democratic because you don't rely completely on gatekeepers to provide culture, but at the same time, we've kind of taken away all those traditional institutional supports. And so I see people, artists who are making a living from their art, and people I know who have to work so hard in every aspect of just creation and promotion and marketing and, accounting, and it's exhausting. It's a lot of stuff. And I don't know to what extent I'm willing to do that. I also want to be able to write what I want. I don't want to put myself in a box, in a niche, and then 2 years later be like, oh, I don't enjoy doing this anymore. And, I already have a job for that.
Yes.
So, I kind of want to stay true to what I want to write. Like this essay, for example, I feel like it took me a long time. I've been writing that for like 3-4 months.
Oh, wow.
And it took me like, of course, like I would go back to it and I would leave it for like a few weeks, and then I would come back and I would read something new. And if I had to have some sort of crazy schedule, like putting something out every week or something, I would have to put out something kind of half baked, and I don't want to do that. So there's kind of like that weird conundrum.
I agree with that. There's a term, audience capture, which is that you're writing, like you had mentioned, to a particular narrow niche, and they come to expect certain things from you. And if you don't give them that, you lose your livelihood, because they're, subscribing to you, paying you monthly because they want something from you. And so you become attached to a particular viewpoint, to a particular type of writing that you may grow out of, but because it pays the bills, you need to continue performing to that idea. And that doesn't sound very authentic. That doesn't sound very organic. And, how many people are going to follow you when you change your mind? How many people are going to accept when you back something that they might have not expected from you? And so it's an interesting sort of position where artists are placed now, because the brand and the marketing seems to come first. And, I think in olden days, in less technologically revolutionary times, the artists relied on patrons and they could just do their thing. Or there was also a particular way in which cities could take in artists and give them certain parts of the city to be bohemians. And it was cheap enough for you to survive in a way where you could do odd jobs. And now, if you go to San Francisco or, the Village in Manhattan, which were traditionally bohemian places for artists to come, now there's literally no places that they could afford. I think it's pushing artists to be independent, to be a little bit more entrepreneurial. And I wonder if in that mindset, you lose some of that artistic flair and spirit.
Yeah, no, that's actually one of the things that I like to explore in my Substack, a topic that I find very fascinating, like this kind of dilemma of like, okay, I'm gonna, for example, like I see a lot of products or courses or for artists. So you can make a living from your art. This is the roadmap for your art business. And these have all been a lot of the times crafted by people who are artists themselves, who found business coaching as an opportunity for them to make an extra living. And it's a very specific roadmap of, I already did it. This is how I did it. I'm going to sell you the way to do it. But the way to do it is selling courses on how to do it. And then it's like, okay, like I get it, like artists need to learn about branding and marketing and all of that stuff, but also there's other things, other supports that come into having a business that have nothing to do with branding and marketing, such as, for example, actually having an audience, a market of people who are going to purchase your service or product, having a clear strategy, business plan of how you're going to create income every month. That's not something that's necessarily going to come from branding. It's going to be supported by branding, but it's not going to come just from that. And I think a lot of the time these coaches focus very much on the front end part, and they don't focus enough on the back end part of running a business and how running a business impacts the art and the type of art that you make. Like that's kind of one of my shticks is, okay, how is working on this as a business going to affect the type of things that I'm willing to do?
Is it a corruption and a distortion of the art, or can they be complementary and can they work in tandem? Which I think is the tension that, we are living through. Are you married with children? I know you had mentioned having a partner, but do you have children?
No children. It's just him and me and our 4 cats.
Is that something that you guys decided or it just never happened?
Yeah, so I don't know. It's not been a decision, actually. It's just been kind of like life circumstances and just never feeling stable enough. Like I freelancer for a decade, and then he had done like some odd jobs, but he didn't have stability in his career until about 5 years ago. I started having more stability about 3 years ago with this new job. So we never felt like solid enough financially to like make that decision. It always felt like we had to like make changes at the last minute. So yeah, I'm still kind of thinking, even though I'm 43, I'm thinking about it still, and just thinking, I guess, is it a huge health risk at this point, or can I still go through with it? Even if I succeed, like I'm gonna be an old mom, all of those question. So, yeah.
I just had a baby 2 weeks ago, and
congratulations.
Maybe less than 2 weeks ago. Yeah, thank you. And all those comments that you made were things that my partner and I thought about. Just finances, just in terms of our age. I am going to be 40 this summer. She's 36, and so it's funny how a lot of the conversation that we've been having has been around finances and the affordability of living. And it's just something that seems to be a very important central element to life now in a way that maybe wasn't for the last generation. Obviously, we're doing much better economically and financially than, relatively speaking, than the rest of history ever, right? But just in terms of how it's feeling after the Great Recession, and just how millennials and Gen Z are sort of looking at the economy and looking at the world and looking at how everything is going, and how there seems to be this sort of slowing down of economic prospects and the belief in growth and progress. So it's interesting. We still decided and went ahead and did it, and I'm very happy to have made that decision. But it's definitely a conversation where you're like, is this something that we, one, could afford, that we could give ourselves fully to as well, right? Because jobs are just so exhausting emotionally, physically. And sometimes you think that, well, am I going to be able to give myself to my partner and also to my children? And is that something that is going to be enough for this relationship and for who I want to be as an individual as well? So it's very complex and complicated to come to those decisions. Did you meet your partner in California, or did you guys meet in Puerto Rico?
No, we've known each other for a long time. He went to the same school I did. Yeah, we started dating when I was a senior in high school. So I've been together for a very, very long time. And then we went to college, and we went to the same university, the University of Puerto Rico. And then when I went to California, he went to Florida to study as well.
What were your parents like growing up?
They were very practical parents, just working. All I remember is I was very much a latchkey kid. So I was by myself a lot since a very young age because my parents were working. And my brother is 6 years older than me, and he was going to a different school. So I spent a lot of time alone. That's mostly what I remember when I think about childhood. But they were there. There was just my mom was, I just have memories of my mom being always stressed out and just coming in and out of the house. She'd never learned to drive, so she was always taking the bus. She worked in kitchens most of my life, so she was a cook. My dad worked a night shift in a data center, so I didn't see him as much during the week because I would go to school and then he would go to work, and then I would see him only on the weekends, basically. So they were there, but it was and my dad also, he has bipolar disorder, so that marked a lot of the relationship and my memories of childhood. I'm not gonna say that they didn't have happy memories, but it was very chaotic.
Are they still together?
No. They split up when I was in college, and then they went their separate ways.
Now, the last essay I read, which was about books and book culture and divergence between the idea of books being a repository of knowledge as opposed to just being a commodity to be used for algorithmic presentation on TikTok and YouTube. So it was a really good essay, but you also mentioned your dad and how he sort of helped you build up your love for books. Was that something that was important in your life too?
Yeah, definitely. I remember, I don't know, I think he's a very smart guy, and he loved to read. He had a very curious, restless mind, and so I was born in 82, and back then it was I guess it was kind of the heyday of these encyclopedias. So he got into one of his things. Fortunately, when he was in his manic stage, he would spend a lot of money that we didn't have, and one of the things is he'd buy all these encyclopedias. But I remember in my room that we had there was a children's encyclopedia and a collection of short stories, children's stories basically. And I remember watching my parents just read, even my mom just reading the Reader's Digest or other magazines, and just get used to seeing them reading a lot. And so I emulated that, and I started discovering just opening these books and not necessarily reading them through, but just letting it kind of wash over me and reading all these stories. But with the essay, what I was telling about is that every summer before school started, we had to go buy school books because I was going to this private school, and it was my dad's job to take me buy the books, and we had to get like the books as cheaply as possible. And so we would go into these secondhand bookstores and try to get them there. But it was really cool because, you know, when you finish the school year, you had this pile of books, go to the bookstores and then like trade them for the next year's school books. And back then they didn't rotate the school books as much, so it was possible to like get the previous year's books from another person. So yeah, it's kind of one of my biggest memories.